Now mind, we have a tendency to discriminate or discriminate against, we discriminate between mind and matter. And that is why we ask the question whether mind is a product of matter, and so our matter is a product of mind. Materialism say that our mind is a product of matter, and idealism say that what you see as matter, that's only your mind. So they continue to quarrel and dispute with each other just because they use the mind of discrimination in order to look at things. But in the tradition of Buddhism, mind and matter are not two separate entities. Sometimes they manifest as mind, sometimes it manifests as matter. It's like in subatomic physics, the element particle sometimes express itself as a particle, sometimes as a wave. So to say that it is a particle is wrong. To say that it is a wave is equally wrong. It is both. And this sheet of paper, which has the left and the right, and we know that we cannot take the left out of the right and the right out of the left. You cannot come and take the right and go to Bordeaux and the left to go to Toulouse. No, they are always together. You cannot take them out of each other. And that is the teaching of interbeing in Buddhism. Interbeing means you cannot be by yourself alone. You have to interbe with us. The left has to interbe with the right. The left is not the enemy of the right. The left has to lean on the right in order to manifest herself. And the right has to lean on the left in order to manifest herself. So this is the mind of non-discrimination. But if we continue with our mind of discrimination, we distort everything. And we oppose matter to mind, left and right, and so on. And last week we also learned that suffering and happiness, they are not enemies. They are. Suffering is made of happiness, and happiness is made of suffering. If there is no suffering, there is no happiness. And if there is no happiness, there is no suffering. It's like the lotus flower and mud. If there is no mud, you cannot grow lotus. And the lotus stay there for some time and become the mud again. So looking into the lotus, you see the mud. And looking into the mud, you see future lotus. So suffering is like that. Someone who has the capacity to go back to himself and listen to his own suffering and look deeply into his suffering, he will be able to understand that suffering inside of him that carries with it the suffering of his father, his mother, his ancestors. And getting in touch with suffering inside helps you to understand your own suffering. And understanding suffering gives rise to compassion. And when compassion arises, you suffer less right away. Because you see the path of of transformation and healing. If you have understood the nature, the roots of your suffering, and then the path leading to the cessation of the suffering will appear in front of you. And having seen the path, you are no longer afraid. You know how to make good use of suffering in order to make happiness. It is like the brothers in Plum Village, they know how to make good use of the mud in order to produce beautiful lotus flowers. There are 1 or 2 lotus flowers left in the upper hamlet and the lower hamlet. So one of the things we learned last week is that we need suffering. Suffering can be useful, and we can speak about the goodness of suffering. Because going back and listen and understand our suffering, we give rise to the birth of compassion and love. And when compassion, love is born, we suffer less right away. Suppose you look at someone, even that someone has made you suffer a lot during the past many years. You don't want to look at him or her because every time you look at him or her, you suffer. Because you believe that that person has made you suffer so much. But now with the practice, it becomes different. Because you have already understood your own suffering. That is why you are capable of recognizing the suffering in him, in her. And you understand why such a person suffers so much. And that person suffers so much and does not know how to handle the suffering. That is why his suffering is spilling all over, around. And you are a victim. Maybe he did not want to make you suffer. Just because he does not know how to handle the suffering, that is why he continues to suffer. And because he suffers, you have to suffer. You are the second victim. And he is the first victim of his suffering. So having understood your own suffering, you have compassion, you have insight, and you suffer less. And that allows you to look at the other person. And when you can see the suffering in her, in him, and you understand why that person suffers like that, you are no longer angry at him anymore. And this is the truth. When you look at someone, and if you can see the suffering in that someone, that he is not capable of handling the suffering, you don't blame him anymore. You are not angry at him anymore. Instead, you want to do something and to say something in order for him to suffer less. It means that you have compassion in your heart. And compassion in your heart does not make you suffer anymore.